These discussions have been going on for months. The problem is that we just don't have answers to a lot of them. But to give you some idea, we can't even decide what funding mechanism to use until we know what the state is going to do with respect to releasing funds. Yes, they have identified $50 million, but they are planning on releasing that over time based upon the achievement of certain milestones by Jackson Labs. Well, that's exactly what we would want to do too. And we've been talking with OTED and Enterprise Florida. We've been talking with Jackson Labs about all of that, because what we need to negotiate is dependent upon the milestones that the state demands. And here's the problem. The state has a certain protocol. I mean, they've done this now for 4, 5, or 6 different business clusters of this type in Florida. And so they're following a template. And their template requires certain things. And they are less sensitive to what we want to do in Collier County's interest. They are following their template. So we're not going to change their template. We can't. So we're trying to find out what the template requires and what they are negotiating with Jackson Labs, and make sure that we don't negotiate something that is contradictory. If they negotiate certain milestones and achievements for Jackson Labs, well, we need to make sure that ours will be consistent with that, because they would expect us to make matching disbursements. So we are doing that. And as a matter of fact, we are getting closer to something that could be presented in the public hearing, and so that everyone could understand where we're going. And then the board would have a chance to hear all that, and the public too, and they could say, okay, we understand what you're trying to negotiate, and it might make sense, but we still don't have all the things decided at the state level, so we can't sign a contract. So we would never want to sign a contract until we see what the state has done, and because we don't want to be placed in a position that is disadvantageous. But we are doing these things. We've been trying to go on a parallel track. Well, what we've done is we've said, we understand that the state has to do their thing, and we're going to have to do our thing, but it's going to be slightly behind what the state does. And as soon as the state begins to firm up their positions on these, we are prepared to firm up our positions on these. And then when that is done, hopefully, shortly after the state makes a decision, we will have something that can be presented to the board for consideration and review and modification or whatever, and public debate. And I think we'll be prepared to do that shortly after the state makes a decision. But I will tell you that it's natural in these circumstances that the state's interests could be different than the county's interests. And both of those interests could be different than Jackson Labs' interests. So trying to carry on the negotiation in that kind of environment is complex and time-consuming. But it's the way it's required to be, and we're trying to do the best we can with it. But we are not dragging our feet. Just as this next decision we'll have to make about the bond certification process. You know, that's a preparatory thing, that we're doing that because we won't have time to do it later on. We're doing it now so that it'll be there if, in fact, we decide to use it, and we may not use it. And so we're trying to keep ahead of the curve, and I think we're in good shape to do that. But it's a challenge. But you'll hear all of that soon, I think, and we'll have answers to a lot of those questions. And then the board will have, I think, at least 60 days to consider a contract. Okay, so that will give us time to massage it and make sure it meets everyone's requirements. Okay, and there are a lot of positive things that are happening there, things that I think you'll find that are comforting and are protective of the interests of Collier County. Okay, that's the best I can do. Commissioner Henning.
I have several questions. This one is a new one. The state, if it's not, the deal doesn't come together by March 1, it goes back in the general fund? Who wrote that?
Legislature.
Okay. Commissioner, here's who wrote, after the state makes their commitment, or OTAD, the county shall identify the funding sources in 120 days.
That's state legislature.
The state legislators did that. So they give us 120 days, and you want to back it down to 60 days?
No, they want it. They wrote it so that it's back down.
Well, that's their problem. Why make it our problem?
What's your alternative?
120 days. Let's make sure, because we have really no new information about Jackson Labs and partnerships. We have a commitment from our college to build a high school there, a charter high school, which they will get the money from the school board, more tax dollars. We have a university commitment to partnership in with Jackson Lab, as long as the state gives them the money. What else is new? There is nothing new.
Well, what's the point?
Well, what's the point is, we're not going to rush this because we don't have all the information. We have something on the agenda to commit the taxpayers to $130 million, but we don't have any new information. I mean, that's the same excuse of why we couldn't put it on the agenda or on the ballot for people to vote on, because we didn't have enough information. So why rush? At least why rush what the state has said to the local government in this bill? We didn't approve a shorter time period of 60 days. It's 120 days. Why would you want to shorten it down and try to get more information and make what I'm hearing from my colleagues is a logical decision? I don't want to shorten it down. The legislators convene in March. They could change that. Anyways, question for staff. You provided the Board of Commissioners terms of grant agreement from Jackson Labs. And in there, it states, Jackson, Florida will use reasonable best efforts to create 240 direct high-wage jobs and salary positions within the first 10 years of operation. Is that a firm commitment? We will use reasonable best efforts?
Commissioner, that was a proposal from the laboratory. It was never agreed to, obviously, by this board. So I would suggest to you that that's an area we certainly want to get more specific on.
Okay, is that those specifics going to include in Collier County, or they were just going to create them? Is that the goal of the board? Is to create these jobs in Collier County?
Do you want answers to these questions?
Sure, I do.
That's what the contract negotiation process is, and that's what the milestone designations are for, so that Jackson Labs is required to achieve certain goals that are beneficial to Collier County before we would sign a contract with them. And that's why we will present to the board such a draft agreement before any funding is approved.
Okay. Then my next question is, if you want to have a benefit to Collier County, would you want staff to do a cost-benefit analysis to justify the expenditures of this project?
Who says they haven't been doing that?
Mr. Oakes, have you done a cost-benefit analysis of spending $120 million for this project?
No, sir, I have not done a formal cost benefit.
Okay. Well, if we want to benefit the citizens in Collier County, would we want to direct staff to do that before going any further, making any commitments?
Well, I disagree that it hasn't been done, but the Productivity Committee did a part of that before the business participants, collaborators, were identified. There is another economic benefit analysis going on by Enterprise Florida, and they will not approve their funds for the project unless they can determine that it is of economic benefit to Florida, and we will not sign a contract with. I wouldn't vote for a contract for Jackson Labs if it didn't show a benefit for Collier County. So, as I said, the milestones have not been identified by the state, and as a result, we can't identify them here yet. Okay? And when we do, we will have the answer to your questions.
I don't think we're going to have the answer to the questions because Enterprise Florida is a not-for-profit. There's no accountability. The RAG report that was done by, I think, the EDC. The advisory board, the productivity, they do a great job, but they are volunteers. I think would be benefit to have our staff to do a cost-benefit analysis and present that to the Board of Commissioners. After all, we are potentially committing $120 million plus cost to service this loan. Would you want to do that?
Yes, I would. And